Welcome inside the War Room. I'm your host, Andrew Valancourt, and we're back today for episode 67 of the Dynasty War Room podcast. On today's show, we're going to do some keep, trade, cut. So I have another special guest here with us today. Chase Browning joins us once more, and we each have some players that we want to run by each other to play some keep, trade, cut. And before we get to that, though, as always, make sure you are following this podcast on your platform of choice. We are on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, you name it, we're there. So go make sure you are following this show so you don't miss any future episodes. And find us on social media. We're on Twitter or X at Dynasty War Room. You can find me on Twitter or Blue Sky at Andrew V. Court. And you can find Chase on Twitter as well. I believe it's Chase. Chase, what's your Twitter handle over there?
It's Chase J. Browning. So
there you go. You can go follow along with both of us there, and you can find our Facebook page, and just follow along. We're happy to interact, answer your fantasy football questions, and we appreciate all your follows and comments and likes, etc. And so let's move on. I got one quick message here for you from my friends at Fast Draft, and I want to tell you about their new fantasy best ball app. You can do quick, fun fantasy drafts, take some of the grind out of fantasy football, and Fast Draft is giving away over $250,000 in prizes this year with all rookie tournaments, all flex tournaments, and even all defense tournaments. So there's something new and different for everyone. Draft picks, it's 20 seconds per draft pick, so you can wrap up an entire draft in just about 5 minutes. And you can sign up today with code WARROOM, and Fast Draft will double your first deposit up to $50. That's right. Just use code WARROOM to double your first deposit today on Fast Draft. All right, so like I said, we are going to play some Keep, Trade, Cut today. We have Chase back for another episode. I hope everyone enjoyed Father's Day and their Juneteenth holiday. We are recording this podcast a little bit early, so if any big breaking news happens over the next few days here that were to change the outlook at any of these players, apologies in advance. But as things stand today, we don't anticipate any big changes involving any of these names. So we're just going to go through. We each have 5 lists of players for each other. So we're going to give those player names and turn it over to the other person here and get our thoughts on who we would keep, who we would trade away, and who we would cut. And I'll kick things off with my first question for Chase. And I want to look at the wide receiver position. So I think there are a lot of good, talented receivers that you can get in the second, third round of startups. And the first 3 names that I want to throw at you are Ladd McConkey, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Garrett Wilson. So, Chase, tell me who you would keep, who you would trade, who you would cut of that trio.
This is a pretty good group of players right here. My initial reaction is just going to go based on the quarterback. Plus, I was very impressed with this player last year, so I'm going to keep Ladd McConkey. I just think he's a PPR machine. He's a target machine. I think he just has a great season coming up here. Now, this next one's pretty tough. I think I'm going to trade JSN. I think he has some value. I think, with Sam Darnold coming in, it scares me a little bit with that offense. I still think he can be productive, but I'm going to trade JSN, and then I'm going to cut Garrett Wilson. I am not the biggest Justin Fields believer. However, I hope for my sake I have some players on the Jets in some other leagues, but I'm going to go ahead and cut Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, and I think, we're going to have some different opinions throughout
for sure
all 10 of these scenarios, but I agree with you entirely on this first set. I would do the same thing. I'd keep McConkey. I think, being paired up with Justin Herbert, potentially the new Keenan Allen of sorts, is a good comparison. And JSN, I think, is a supremely talented player. But, you and I both share some of those hesitations about Sam Darnold and, of course, Justin Fields as well. And Garrett Wilson has always been one of those players that obviously very talented. He's getting a lot of targets, but the offense has struggled. There have been a lot of ups and downs. Last year, Davante Adams really was, the better player once he arrived in New York. Of course, some of that had to do with Aaron Rodgers and the connection that they had, but I think that's the proper order here. And I'll turn things over to you for your first set of players for me.
Alrighty, so we're going to start off with a couple younger running backs, and then we're going to mix in a rookie wide receiver in here. So we have Devin Achane, Bucky Irving, and Travis Hunter. Who are you going to keep, who are you going to trade, and who are you going to cut?
Now, this one is unique because I think in a startup draft, I would have an extremely difficult time clicking draft on any of these players. I like them all. I don't love any of them. And I think the way that I would approach this, I would keep Devon Achane. I would trade Travis Hunter, and I would cut Bucky Irving. And my reasoning for this, I was not very high on Bucky Irving as a prospect. I was worried about his athletic profile and not necessarily being the fastest guy, the biggest guy, that sort of thing. But he very clearly has secured the top role in a good offense, which makes him difficult to cut. But I still worry a little bit about the team investment. There is still going to be Rachaad White that is mixed in on passing downs. The offense, Emeka Egbuka is added in, but they're losing Liam Cohen, so it's going to be a new coordinator. And I think that this offense, while very good, leaves some room for unpredictability in the future. Whereas Travis Hunter, to me, as the player that I'm going to keep, I think he is the ultimate boom bust of this group. He could be the player that, becomes a top 5, top 10 receiver and lights up the fantasy world. But there's also some considerable risk with playing both ways. That increases injury risk. If things don't work out right away at receiver, he could transition to focusing more on cornerback. But Jacksonville seems like they are committed to playing him at wide receiver as his first position, which is great news for fantasy. And so I'm going to keep him for the upside and the receiver aspect, the fact that, it's a more valuable position. I think if he were to hit, there's going to be less ups and downs compared to the running back position. And Achane, though, Devon Achane, I'm going to keep him because I think we really saw him break out last year. He is headed for another huge season, in my opinion. He can catch passes. He's extremely explosive and efficient, and he can break out a long touchdown at any time. And even though there is some injury risk, which is why, again, I'd be hesitant to draft really any of these three players at their respective costs and startups. I think that securing somebody like Devon Achane, who is capable of a 30-point game on any given week, I do prefer that upside over Travis Hunter. So that would be my 3. Would you do the same thing, or would you do something different?
We're on the same page a little bit. I am a huge Travis Hunter believer. I think he has a chance to be one of the faces of the league if he plays wide receiver a majority of the time, which I'm hoping for. I actually traded into the first round in our home draft to take Travis Hunter. So I'm a firm believer in him. But yeah, him and Achane are like right there on the same level. And if I had to keep Travis, I'd trade Achane. And then, like you said, I'd get rid of Bucky Irving. And with Achane, his injuries do scare me a little bit, that offense. So, but when he's healthy, he's a stud. So they're really close.
All right. So let's throw another 3 players at you. And these are all running backs going right around the same point in drafts. So let's go with Jonathan Taylor, Breece Hall, and Travion Henderson, who is another player that I know you like as a rookie that you took in the first round of our home league. But 2 other players that you have some history with as well, and obviously more proven. So what are you going to do with Jonathan Taylor, Breece Hall, and Travion Henderson?
This is tough. So Jonathan Taylor and Breece Hall remind me a lot of each other. You know, they're both in probably run first offenses. The quarterback plays very similar with, you know, Daniel Jones or Anthony Richardson and then Justin Fields. But I'm actually going to keep Breece Hall. He's also on, you know, one of my leagues, and I think he has a chance to really, you know, be a comeback player type of season. I know with Aaron Rodgers there, he struggled a little bit, but I think if, you know, Fields can get him the ball more in the passing game and they go to more of a run first offense, I think he has a chance to, you know, have a really good season. I'd actually trade Jonathan Taylor and I'd cut TreVeyon Henderson. And like you said, I'm a huge TreVeyon Henderson fan. He's just not proven yet. He's a rookie.
Surprised by your choice, but I like your logic because I would do the same thing. But give me the reason.
I think that I knew that would surprise you a little bit. He's not the number one guy yet. However, I do think he's going to become the number one guy in New England. I just think if Daniel Jones can be the starting quarterback, I think Jonathan Taylor actually is going to benefit from that. And I think you could probably get a lot if you do trade Jonathan Taylor more than TreVeyon Henderson, but it's all about being a proven player. So that's the route I'm going.
And I do think if we were to take a look at sort of the consensus keep, trade, cut rankings on these players, which is, you know, something I looked at to choose these three guys, TreVeyon Henderson is listed above Jonathan Taylor and Breece Hall. So it's actually reverse order on keep, trade, cut. Henderson is first, Taylor second, Breece Hall, albeit 42 overall, 45 overall, 47 overall. So, you know, all within a couple picks of each other. But I think that's what makes this such a difficult choice, because you have a little bit more proven with the, you know, really high upside in Breece Hall, the steady, consistent, big time running back over the years in Jonathan Taylor, but a little bit older. And then, of course, the young hotshot in TreVeyon Henderson, which, you know, this is the time of year everyone's excited about the rookies. But I do agree. I would go Breece Hall and then Jonathan Taylor and cut TreVeyon Henderson, although I do really like the potential there. I do think passing up on the consistency and what you get with the other two is something I would prefer to have over Henderson at this point in time.
And that's the thing, too, with keep, trade, cut is they do, put a lot of emphasis on the age and the hype and the rookie status. So that's another thing I do consider at this point of the year before the season is where they do have those rookies. But yeah.
Yeah. So hit me with your next group of players.
All right. So these players are kind of in the same rankings on keep, trade, cut. You and I went over this a little bit. So we have a couple younger wide receivers and then a veteran, an ex-fantasy stud back in the day. But we got Xavier Worthy, Zay Flowers, and Christian McCaffrey.
And this is, Xavier Worthy is a player that I was really high on last year. And I wasn't high enough on Brian Thomas Jr., but I still really liked Xavier Worthy. I've liked Zay Flowers, and then you obviously can't argue with the production that you've been able to get from CMC. This is something where I think it is very team dependent. If this is something where you have already done your startup draft and it's simply identifying a trade target to help your team win, then I think you would have to keep CMC. But if this is a startup draft, I think I'm probably looking at it a little bit differently. In fact, I think my order would be entirely different from a trading for a player for a contender versus a startup. If I was trading for one of these players, I would keep Christian McCaffrey, I would trade Zay Flowers, and I would cut Xavier Worthy. If I was in a startup draft, though, I think I would go the opposite order, and I would keep Xavier Worthy, trade Zay Flowers, and cut Christian McCaffrey. And this is where this exercise is difficult because it's, you can't really, you don't truly know. It's more of a looking at it from a vacuum standpoint. So given the way I just said that, I'm going to assume I'm trying to go for going for the championship, and I'll go ahead and stick with my trade for options, and I'll go with CMC as my keep, Zay Flowers as my trade, and Xavier Worthy as my cut. And I think that Christian McCaffrey is in line for certainly the best 2025 of this group, not even close. Certainly the age and the injuries definitely scare you, which is why from a long-term standpoint, I think there's certainly cause for concern, but he is still young enough that I think you can get 2 or 3 good seasons out of McCaffrey. Zay Flowers, I think we have seen kind of what he is. He is a mid to low end wide receiver 2, probably going to hover around wide receiver 20 for basically his entire career. And I think that's a good, solid player to have. So from a stability standpoint, I like that. Whereas Xavier Worthy, I think, has a higher ceiling and a lower floor. My fear with Xavier Worthy is I think he is going to be the wide receiver 2 in the Chiefs offense behind Rashee Rice. I would prefer Rice over Worthy. And given that cap on his upside, at least in the short term, that's where I would put him at the bottom of this list, just because I would prefer other options in that offense. But I do love the speed, of course, and the explosiveness. But give me the given production that you've had. And, you just have to understand the risk with the injury, but Christian McCaffrey is the player that I would like to have out of this group.
And I think you said it perfectly. This is definitely a team-dependent keep-cut trade. I think you're dead on with, if you're going for a championship this upcoming season, I think you definitely want to have Christian McCaffrey as the keep. Now, if it was in the middle of the pack, or even just a rebuilder, I'd probably lean Zay Flowers over Xavier Worthy. Just on the standpoint of, I think Zay Flowers can be a little bit more consistent in that offense. I know he does deal with a little bit of injury stuff, but I think they're going to try to get him the ball more. I've seen some stuff where they definitely want to try to get him the ball more in his hands. So that's the route I would go.
He's a good player too. I mean, that's
for sure.
Zay Flowers is a good player, but it's one of those things where the Ravens offense is built around the run game, whether it's Lamar or Derrick Henry. So I think that there is a bit of a cap on his ceiling, but still very solid player. And if he could just catch 2 or 3 more touchdowns,
for sure,
he would be an awesome player for fantasy given in a PPR league. But there are some drawbacks there with the touchdowns. But let me throw out some guys that do not struggle with touchdowns. And Mike Evans, Tyreek Hill, and Chris Godwin are the 3 names that I want to toss at you. So 3 veterans. And, obviously guys like Tyreek Hill have been at the top of the league. You got Chris Godwin, who was awesome before his injury. And then Mike Evans, the ultra steady, consistent touchdown and 1,000-yard machine. So who you taking of those 3? Keep, trade, cut.
And all these guys are healthy?
Hey, we're talking right now, real life. Their current status. So currently all healthy. But, all 3 have had their injury moments over the past, 12 months.
So this one might surprise you a little bit, but I'm actually going to keep Chris Godwin. I think Chris Godwin was on pace to be a monster last year before he got hurt. I think Baker loves throwing him the football. I think he's definitely the PPR target in that offense. I think Evans definitely gets the ball a lot and he gets a lot of the touchdowns, but in a PPR league, I think Chris Godwin's just a perfect receiver to have. So I'm going to keep Chris Godwin. This next one's tough. I love Mike Evans. I just think this is going to be his last year. If I had to bet, I think that this is Mike Evans, swan song season. So
you think last year in the league or last year with Tampa?
I think that last year in the league.
That's a bold prediction. You heard it here first.
I think it's. I just think. I don't know. I've read some things, and we'll see. But I think this might be his last season. So,
and the team is clearly building for the future. I mean, they taking Ibuka,
drafting Ibuka for sure. But yeah, that's a bold prediction. I think if he goes and has another 1,000-yard season, and Tampa Bay can make the playoffs and go on a run. I think we'll see. I mean, we've seen a lot of those players just, call it quits, after a good season. And, we'll see. It's a bold prediction, but we'll see. But
so you're cutting Mike Evans and keeping...
So I'm going to cut Mike Evans,
or trading
Chris Godwin, and trading Tyreek Hill. Okay. I still think Tyreek Hill has a couple more seasons left in him. I don't know if they're all going to be with Miami. But when he plays and he can just not be a head case, I think he's definitely a great player. But it sure is.
But so I do agree with you though. I would do the same thing. I would keep Godwin, trade Hill, and cut Evans for largely the same reason too. I think that I am a bit more skeptical. Like I think that the risk of retirement for Tyreek Hill is just as high as Evans. But I think that the ceiling is higher for Hill this year. I think that Evans is a much safer bet. Hill could easily tank and fall apart, get hurt. Like it could be a very, very quick ending for Tyreek Hill, which would be what I'm afraid of. But the upside is still so high that I'm willing to take that risk, when you're comparing him to some older players here. But I like Chris Godwin. I think that assuming he's full, at full health, that I would keep him as well. I think you'll get a couple more good seasons out of him too with that contract extension.
It's crazy to see how Tyreek Hill was one of the top players in redraft last year. Like he was going so early, and it's just crazy. It's just crazy to see these players and how just time.
Yeah, Father Time crazy. Remains undefeated.
Yes, sir.
So hit me with your next group of players here.
All right, this is going to be a good one. So we have all quarterbacks, all in the same draft class. All were rookies last year. So we have Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Bo Nix.
And I like this question because I think this is something that if you are in a startup draft this summer, you are pretty much faced with this exact decision in the second round if you are looking to nab a quarterback. And I don't think it's an easy choice among these three. I mean, certainly on name value and pedigree, Caleb Williams would make a lot of sense. But then there's the production angle with Bo Nix. There's the ceiling case for guys like Drake May. And that's what makes this so difficult for me. But I'm going to keep Caleb Williams, trade Bo Nix, and cut Drake May. And this is me aiming for the upside because I still think that Caleb Williams has top 5 quarterback potential. I think he's got all the pieces. He's got a better coaching staff. But I also recognize with this that Caleb Williams, to me, also has the highest risk of being a bust out of these three players. So this is a true boom-bust pick for me. I have a very difficult time seeing Caleb Williams just being an average NFL quarterback. I think he's going to rise to the level of a Pro Bowl caliber player, or he's going to be somebody that after the season, Bears fans are going to be going, hey, this maybe isn't working out. He's got one more shot. And then, after year 3, you're looking somewhere else. So very, very wide range of outcomes. But because I do see that high upside as a very likely possibility, I'm still willing to go that route. I'm going to keep Bo Nix. I think that Bo Nix is really undervalued. He is someone that was surprisingly productive as a rookie.
So good last year.
Yeah, very pro-ready, looked like a perfect fit for the Sean Payton offense. And I think as a safe, good, solid option, he's my QB2 in our home league. And, I snagged him with the final pick in the first round of that rookie draft. And I think he's a really solid player. And I'd be very close to putting him above Caleb Williams. But I'm going to keep the upside play first. Bo Nix second. And then I'll put Drake May as my cut. And it's not a knock on Drake May because I think he has a lot of potential. I like him as a player. But there is, we've only seen a handful of weeks. We need a full season. It's going to be a new coaching staff again. Probably not the most quarterback-friendly offense with Mike Vrabel as the head coach. Tennessee never really had a strong passing offense. And so I'm a little bit worried there. But obviously the rushing yards are really what helps Drake May. But we just don't have that level of proven consistency that we saw from Bo Nix. And so I'm going to take Nix ahead of Drake May, even though I do really like the upside. And there will be people that I think would put Drake May first of this group. They see the upside. They're less worried about a bust compared to Caleb Williams, given, because Caleb Williams really struggled with taking sacks, looked off at a lot of times. So, it's not a sure thing with Caleb Williams. So I want to caution people on that. Whereas Bo Nix, I think, is locked into, a low-end QB1 for the next 10 years. I don't know that he's ever going to be, a top 3, top 5 QB, but nothing would stop him from being in the 6 to 12 range for the next decade. And I really don't think that would surprise a lot of people given what we saw as a rookie. So that's how I'm going to rank those 3.
And I think we're definitely in agreement there. I think I would keep Caleb Williams just because of the weapons, of the Ben Johnson effect. I think if Caleb Williams can't be successful under Ben Johnson, he's never going to be successful. So I'm hoping to see an improvement. You just actually traded for Caleb Williams in your Florida league. So
I did.
Yeah. So you're definitely a believer in him and hoping he plays well. And, I would trade Bo Nix. I just think Bo Nix can be more consistent than Drake May. And I think all these players are awesome. I think they're going to be playing in the next, 5 to 10 years in this league. And I think they're definitely going to build that Denver offense around Bo Nix. I don't think he's going anywhere. And especially, like you said, he played so well as a rookie. He looked so calm, cool, collected back there. And if they can just keep getting him some receivers, we'll see, with RJ Harvey and that run game, how that goes. And then, I'd trade Bo Nix and then cut Drake May.
All right. So here's my next trio for you. Rome Odunze, Josh Jacobs, and Chase Brown. What are you going to do with those 3?
And these are all players I've had that I have a history with. Gosh, this one's tough.
Yeah, because you got
my heart's
young
telling
wide receiver that, unproven but sky high ceiling, and then you got your veteran proven running back and your younger upside running back. So it's these are 3 guys going all, in the same round in startups.
This is tough. I think I'm gonna keep Chase Brown just because of the age, and plus I like that offense better than Green Bay. I think Josh Jacobs was a stud last year, and I think it had to do a lot with, Jordan Love getting hurt earlier in the year. I think Matt LaFleur is definitely going to be more of a balanced or pass first team with Love being healthy going into the season. I don't think Jacobs is going to have as good of a season. And then I'm actually going to cut the young Rome Odunze. I am a Rome Odunze fan. There's so many weapons in Chicago. Like, I don't know, one game it could be DJ Moore, one game it could be Burden in the tight ends. You just don't know. But I do. You were a huge Chase Brown believer last year, and it actually benefited me a lot, listening to some of your advice on Chase Brown.
Yeah, I mean, I believe you landed Chase Brown and Khalil Shakir in a trade for Josh Jacobs.
I did. And I definitely in a rebuild and wanted to get some younger guys, and definitely needed to fill up my lineup a little bit more. But yeah, definitely benefited from that for sure.
So there you go. First-hand advice from this podcast, helping people out. So I would also keep Chase Brown, and I think it's a very difficult decision between Odunze and Jacobs. It could come down to your status of the team. If you're a contender, obviously you'd probably prefer Jacobs. I would keep Rome Odunze and cut Josh Jacobs simply for the positional value and the youth and upside that Odunze has. But I am a huge Chase Brown believer, and so that's why I would still have him ahead of those other 2. But a little bit, dependent on your team trajectory in the way you want to go.
For sure.
So who's next on your list?
All right, so we have some we're talking big name wide receivers here. So we got Amon-Ra St. Brown, Puka Nacua, and CeeDee Lamb.
And when I saw you put this list in our show notes here, I was thinking, oh man, like, I really love all three players. And so that makes this very, very difficult. CeeDee Lamb has been the stud, proven top-tier receiver, but so has Amon-Ra St. Brown, and then Puka Nacua has just started off his career about as well as you possibly can, tied with Matthew Stafford, of course, in the Rams. Amon-Ra St. Brown got an extension with Jared Goff, who got extended, and then CeeDee Lamb is tied to the Cowboys and Dak Prescott. So this is really a tough decision because I think my opinion on how I would rank these three has changed on an almost weekly basis since the season ended. I would keep CeeDee Lamb. I think that even though he's the oldest, he still has the highest ceiling, the highest upside of these guys. I think he's just the most proven guy that can carry an entire offense and be a true, he can be the number one overall receiver in fantasy football. To me, where this decision gets a lot more difficult is between Amon-Ra St. Brown and then Puka Nacua. And I think I have flip-flopped back and forth. And so let me walk through kind of my thought process on the two before I make a decision. Amon-Ra St. Brown is somebody that has been unbelievably consistent. He is almost never going to hurt your team when he's in the lineup. He has been a touchdown guy, a target hog on a very good offense, but he's losing Ben Johnson. Frank Ragnow is gone from this offense. Jameson Williams has taken the next step into being an upper tier wide receiver. Sam Laporta is there. Jahmyr Gibbs out of the backfield. But he does still have that great connection with Jared Goff. Now, the other thing that concerns me with St. Brown is that there were reports recently that he had knee surgery following the season, and he'll be good to go for the season, back for training camp and everything, but, slightly concerning. And then there's Puka Nacua, who's had some injury issues of his own, but has been Matthew Stafford's preferred target, was so good that the team decided to get rid of Cooper Kupp, and is the youngest of this trio. So I do go back and forth. I will say I am mildly concerned about Amon-Ra St. Brown. If his touchdowns regress just a little bit and he loses just a few targets here and there to Jameson Williams, I think you could be seeing a slight decline in 2025 for St. Brown, but I'm still going to keep him for the consistent production that he gives. But it comes with the caveat. This is very, very close. So I'll cut Puka and I'll feel terrible about it. But I just got to go with the guy that has been arguably the most reliable receiver in the NFL. And I think there is a little bit of concern with Puka Nacua if what happens once Matthew Stafford moves on. If this is his last year, does his role change at all? Does whoever steps in, is it a veteran? Is it a rookie? Are they going to have the same connection? So at least with St. Brown and Goff, I know they're tied together for the next few seasons. And I still think that offense in Detroit is going to be a top-tier offense. And so I'll keep CeeDee Lamb, trade Amon-Ra, and cut Puka Nacua.
And I'll give you some props, Andrew. When we had our startup draft 3 years ago, I believe, I think that Amon-Ra St. Brown pick, man, that was probably the best pick in that entire draft. And you've had the pleasure of having CeeDee Lamb and Amon-Ra on that team and helped you win a championship. So it's hard to talk bad about your guys.
I know, and it's tough. I took St. Brown, I want to say it was, 7th or 8th round? It was right after his rookie season, and there was the speculation of, is he going to be elite? Was it a fluke? Is it just a flash in the pan? That sort of thing. And they drafted Jameson Williams that year, too, so there was a lot of, fears. Mm-hmm. I was very much against that Jameson Williams pick. I've come around a bit since, but, Amon-Ra St. Brown has been my guy there, and CeeDee Lamb was my second round pick, I believe, in that startup. So, and I have Puka in a number of leagues as well. He was a guy that I aggressively was picking up as a free agent or drafting in the fourth round when he came out, and obviously that worked out very well. So, three guys I like a lot, but and you really can't go wrong.
And I'd agree.
They're all elite
stud my rankings are the same.
Yeah, and I think that would be pretty in line with what a lot of people would do, but I don't think that's an easy decision, and I wouldn't blame anybody for rearranging those three in pretty much any order. So my last group of three for you is going to be at the quarterback position, involving a couple names that I know you're not super high on, and that's why I wanted to pose this question to you, because I think they're all going right around the same spot in drafts. They're all essentially fifth-round picks or so, fourth, fifth round. And so I have Brock Purdy, J.J. McCarthy, and Kyler Murray, who I know is your boy. But tell me about those three guys. What would you do with that group of guys?
You would post this question. Gosh. Let me just start off by saying this. I am, like I said in the other episode, I'm a huge Michigan fan. I've watched a lot of J.J. McCarthy. I want J.J. to be successful in the NFL. He has to prove it to me. So I know he's surrounded by some weapons, but I want him to be successful, but he hasn't played a snap in the NFL yet. And there's so much pressure on him. So I'm actually going to cut J.J. McCarthy. And this one might surprise you a little bit, but I'm actually going to keep Kyler Murray.
Okay.
I did a lot of thinking, and I mean, Trey McBride, Marvin Harrison Jr., he has the weapons. Plus, he does run, which I love from Kyler Murray. I think he could have a big season, and I want him to have a big season. I think it'll benefit a lot of my teams if he does. And I just have never really been a Brock Purdy believer. But I know he just got that massive contract. You know, you have CMC. You do. So yeah, I'm gonna keep Kyler Murray. I'm gonna trade Brock Purdy over JJ just because he has, proven himself in this league. He has the contract. He is the guy. And then I'm gonna cut JJ. But like I said, these names fluctuate every week for me. I mean, I could be sitting here in a couple months during the season and saying I'm keeping JJ for the next 5 or 10 years. So we'll just have to see.
And I would keep JJ McCarthy. So I would keep JJ McCarthy. I would trade Kyler Murray.
And you're a big JJ guy.
Yeah, and I would trade Kyler Murray and cut Brock Purdy. I'm a big believer in JJ McCarthy. I think he can be a QB1 in his rookie season. I was thinking today, I was like, I really think he's going to end up in that 10 to 12 spot in terms of where he's going to be at the end of the year. And if he does that in what is essentially his rookie season, I think that value is going to shoot up even more. I think he's going to jump from a fifth-round pick to a third-round pick, maybe even a second-round pick. He'll probably be going somewhere along the lines of where you can get Bo Nix right now. So I'm a believer in the talent. Kyler Murray, I've been a fan of for a long time, although he is very frustrating. He's a guy that I think should be better than he is. He has all the tools. He has the weapons. He's had a lot of, QB1 finishes in fantasy football. He runs the ball, and yet you still just can't quite feel awesome about him, which is very, very frustrating because everything is there, and there's always one little piece that seems to be missing. It's like if you do a puzzle and you have like that one piece that you lost and you can't find it. That's what Kyler...
Or the dog ate it.
Yeah, that's what Kyler Murray feels like. You have the awesome 1,000-piece puzzle, and there's that one piece in the upper corner that like is gone, and you just don't know where it is. And that's... He
should be one of those guys. It's like a slam dunk toward a guy like a QB1, a guy you feel happy about, being your quarterback one on your team, and you just feel left not satisfied. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, he's inconsistent, but he's so talented, and he does have good games that it's like, well, you can't quit him. But he's always in the mix. I think he always he usually ends up being a good value in drafts, which is what makes him even more frustrating because you feel like you're getting such a good deal on Kyler Murray because he's, especially the last 2 seasons where he's dropped pretty considerably from where he was going, 3-4 years ago in startups, where he was, first round pick, second round pick, and now he's, 4th, 5th type of area for him. So, but I think we've explained that pretty well with Kyler Murray and the ups and downs. But JJ McCarthy, to me, he's the youngest. He's got the highest upside of the bunch, whereas Brock Purdy, to me, has the lowest upside. I think Brock Purdy is the safest of these 3 guys, but I would rather shoot for the upside with my quarterbacks, unless you're looking in terms of like a QB3. I think having a safe QB3 option is very good, or even it's QB2. But for my QB1 in Dynasty, I want the upside. I want the opportunity for him to be a top 5 guy. And McCarthy and Murray both have that in their, it's something that they can do. They have it in the bank, but Purdy does not. And so that's why I would be cutting Brock Purdy. So who's your last group of 3 over there for me?
All right. So we have some 3, big time names, young guys, all rookies last year, same draft class. So we have Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., and Marvin Harrison Jr.
And this one, I think, is probably the most straightforward for me of these trios of players that we've talked about today. I'm going to keep Malik Neighbors far and away the number 1 to me of this bunch. I actually, you could put Malik Neighbors in the prior group with CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra, and Puka. I still might keep Neighbors above all 3 of those names. That's how high I am on Malik Neighbors. I would love to be able to start off a startup with him in the back of the first round. I think if he can just get some semblance of good quarterback play, he could be incredible. But
yeah, Jackson Dart turns out to be something.
Yeah, and I'm a little skeptical there, which makes it difficult, and why I think you included Neighbors in this group instead, because there is a bit more of a wide range of outcomes given the poor quarterback situation. But of this group, I will put Neighbors as my keep. And I'm going to trade Brian Thomas Jr. and cut Marvin Harrison Jr. I really like Marvin Harrison. I think that he's got the upside, the ceiling, and would be a player that I would love to have on a roster. And I have him in a few leagues. But Brian Thomas Jr. was so good last year. He's on a good offense as well. I don't think that the offenses are... I actually think that the Jaguars and the Cardinals offenses are somewhat similar tiers. I'd probably take Arizona's first, but I think that Trevor Lawrence is probably a better long-term option in terms of quarterback-wide receiver pairing. Comparing Murray to Harrison and then Lawrence with BTJ, I think that I like the connection better there. Although Brian Thomas Jr. did a lot of his big work last year with Mac Jones, so it's not a slam dunk either. But given that Brian Thomas Jr. simply had the better rookie season, and I don't think it was particularly close, I think that Brian Thomas Jr. was elite. He showed that he can be a true number 1 receiver in this league. He does have the added competition with Travis Hunter, but Marvin Harrison Jr. also has added competition with Trey McBride, who was the number 1 option in that passing attack last year. So I think that in a trade, you can capitalize on some big-time value with Brian Thomas Jr., and I would trade him, and I would cut Marvin Harrison Jr., and I would be holding on to Malik Neighbors. He's a guy that I simply would not be trading. He's somebody that would be locked and loaded into my roster for as long as he plays in this league. So I'm very, very high on Malik Neighbors, and that's how I would go with these 3.
And I completely agree with you. You just have to base it off the numbers. Malik with Drew Lock and I don't even remember who they had last year. That's how bad the quarterback play was.
Danny DeVito and Drew Lock and Daniel Jones. So not exactly a murderer's row of quarterbacks.
Yeah. But just based on the numbers, you gotta keep Neighbors and get the value from Brian Thomas, because I mean he just had a monster year and then caught Marvin Harrison.
All right, so there you have it. There is 10 different trios, 10 different groups of players that we went through, did keep, trade, cut. Hope that was enjoyable, entertaining. Maybe you learned something from that in terms of guys that are going in a similar range, that if you were listening to this and going, oh man, I like that one guy way better than the other two, go make a trade offer, because chances are you might be able to get something done, because all of these players that we talked about in their various groupings are going within the same tier in terms of value. So if you really like one of these guys, go out, send offers, start a conversation. You never know what can happen, and go make something happen for your team. So I want to thank Chase for joining us again. This makes back-to-back weeks you're now the first and second guest ever on the Dynasty War Room podcast.
Yeah, man. It's been a blast.
And we'll see if we can get you on again for some in the future as well. So I think it's fun to do some of these where you get to bounce things off of other people. So I hope people listening enjoyed it as well, and had a good holiday weekend. And we'll be back again with another episode next week. I want to thank you all very much for tuning in. Signing off, I am Andrew Valancourt, and you have been listening to the Dynasty War Room podcast.